Hey everyone, I just wanted to quickly thank you for all your support for the podcast, and the feedback we've been getting has been great. We've really enjoyed bringing you some captivating conversations. We recorded this interview with Dan Reecer from Acala to talk about Karura back on May 24th. And as many of you are probably aware, they've won the first slot auction. Their chain is producing blocks beautifully, and as I speak, they're distributing rewards to their participants. Be sure to follow the podcast on your favorite platform because we're just getting started. Welcome everyone to the Parachain Auctions podcast. My name is Brian Hoffman, and I'm Kraken's crypto platform product lead. And together we will explore the topics, people, and technologies involved in the Parachain ecosystem. And today we're joined by Dan Reecer, who is the VP of Growth at Acala. Hi Dan, welcome to the podcast.
Hey Brian, thanks for having me on.
Acala is about to release Karura, which is a parachain on the Kusama blockchain. How would you describe this project to the average person?
Yeah, it's a great question. So our team at the Acala Foundation, we're building two projects primarily. So we're building Acala for the Polkadot ecosystem and Karura for the Kusama ecosystem. Both of these we call a DeFi hub. So in Karura's case, we're building this DeFi hub to serve the DeFi demand of the Kusama community. And then of course, on the other side, Acala is being built to serve the DeFi demand of the Polkadot ecosystem. Karura specifically, this is going to be our first launch. And with Karura, the goal here is to build two things. It's a platform, so a layer one blockchain, I guess you could say equivalent to something like Ethereum. And then on top of that, we've already built our own applications on our own blockchain to kind of showcase what the chain itself can do. So the three kind of core products that we've built on top of our blockchain are, number one, the Karura DEX, which is an AMM style DEX similar to Uniswap. The Karura dollar stablecoin. So KUSD is a stablecoin, and we see this becoming kind of the de facto stablecoin of the Kusama ecosystem that any other parachain in the future can leverage. And then third, which is a product that I'm really excited about, is what we call liquid KSM staking, or LKSM. This allows people to stake their Kusama, but get a liquid kind of receipt for that they can use within DeFi.
That's really interesting. What would you say is the most unique aspect of Karura and all of the associated functionality that you just described? Like, what makes it so unique, and why should people care about Karura over any of the other parachains?
Yeah, I think kind of what I mentioned with this dual aspect of being a blockchain and a set of applications. So we're kind of appealing to two different audiences. We're building a blockchain that people can build applications on. So this is a platform that can scale out and have multiple applications built on top. But on the other hand, it's an application set or a suite of applications that any Kusama community member can use almost immediately after we launch. So people can actually go in and use Karura, which is why I'm hoping Karura wins the first parachain auction so that people can finally, after waiting in some cases a couple of years almost for Kusama to launch, it'll be great to have a platform and application that people can go in and use almost right away.
Yeah, I think that's going to be super powerful. Why did you guys decide to build all of this on top of Substrate and work with Parity on all this?
Yeah, so that goes back to the Acala team's been building for around 3 years in the kind of Substrate community. Back then, Rui Tao, Betty, and Brian started working together on a kind of synthetic asset platform. And then they met our fourth co-founder, Fuyao, at a Substrate hackathon. And through conversations, they realized that although they were building this synthetic asset trading platform, there needed to be kind of a first step, which is what kind of turned into Acala. So the need for a stablecoin was a big topic between the team. So that led to exploring, should we build on an Ethereum? Should we look at Cosmos? They evaluated several different platforms and ended up going with Substrate, mostly for a couple reasons. So with Polkadot and with Kusama, one of the biggest differences and advantages over other platforms is what sometimes is referred to as shared security. I like to call it plug and play security, because you win a slot in one of these parachain auctions that we can get into, and you immediately inherit this whole set of validators that on Polkadot they're worth 40 billion dollars or so. So it's very, very secure, kind of bank grade security on Polkadot. And then Kusama's evolved into quite a robust network as well, around 4 billion. So that was a big reason. And then the second reason for choosing Substrate is this ability to customize the blockchain at the blockchain level. On Ethereum, you've had a lot of applications built, and there's this concept of composability, kind of building blocks that can be put together between different teams over time. But with Substrate, you actually get the composability at the blockchain layer as opposed to only at the application layer. So with Acala and Karura, we've been able to customize different aspects of the blockchain for DeFi specifically. And you'll have other parachains, of course, customizing for other use cases as well. But an example of what that means is we were able to build this kind of bring your own gas feature within the Karura and Acala blockchain, which allows people to say they bridge Ethereum over from the Ethereum network, and they've got wrapped ETH in their wallet. They can immediately pay the first transaction fee in that wrapped ETH instead of having to go out and find KAR or find ACA, which they may not even know how to do. So that's an example of how you can customize at the chain level and then bring kind of quite a bit of benefit to the user at the application layer through that customization.
Yeah, I certainly think that's something pretty unique about Polkadot in general and Parachains and how they operate. So many projects are choosing to release Parachains on both Kusama and Polkadot, or one or the other. Some are just waiting for Polkadot. But why did you guys go ahead and decide to try and have this Parachain slot on Kusama rather than just waiting for Polkadot?
Yeah, I've been an advocate for Kusama since since day one, back when it first launched. Because prior to Acala, I was at Web3 Foundation and got to spend quite a bit of time on Kusama and learned kind of that, the whole the value proposition of Kusama over time. And then of course Polkadot launched after. So the reason why we chose to build on both networks and will run these two networks in parallel is very similar to why Gavin chose to create this new model of having Kusama and Polkadot run together. What Gavin did back when he started this was he changed the traditional model of having testnet first and then mainnet second, where you can test things all you want on testnet, but without real value, there's no way of truly knowing how it'll operate in the real world until you move it to mainnet. And then, of course, if it breaks on mainnet, there's losses of potentially millions of dollars. So the concept around Kusama was to add a middle step in between testnet and Polkadot in this case, where Kusama is this real value network where things can be tested and audited on testnet and then moved to Kusama first. Then if it's kind of fully kind of refined and battle tested, then it will move on to Polkadot. So I think necessary background for why Karura is launching on Kusama, because it's the same concept. We can, for our DeFi products, we can now have a testnet, which we call Mandala. And then as soon as things are tested and audited and refined on testnet, we'll launch it on Karura first, which will likely be, it'll of course be a real value environment, but not quite as big and robust as Acala. So it gives us a place to basically experiment with new products, even experiment with maybe riskier parameters within the DeFi products. And then if there's a product that we decide is ready and kind of has been refined enough to move on to Acala, then it will do so after Karura. But for us, the Polkadot community and the Kusama community have become so large and also have kind of diverted over time into two kind of distinctly separate communities. So we know that there's demand for DeFi within the Kusama KSM community as well as in the Polkadot community. So we'll run both of these networks in parallel.
That's super interesting. Yeah, I think a couple months ago we might have said that Kusama seemed very underappreciated and maybe underestimated, but recently it seems like it's getting a lot more attention. You see the price going up. and people are putting a lot more time and effort into that than before. In fact, we've seen a lot of projects decide to do Kusama auctions,
Yeah.
which we weren't expecting, right? We're getting very close to the slot auctions going live on Kusama. And I'm just curious to know a little bit about what your strategy is going to be for sourcing the funds to bid on that slot.
Yeah, definitely. So I think for this question, it helps to maybe take a step back and explain the whole process that's going on right now and why. Part of this stems from the fact that Gavin had all the experience with building the Ethereum virtual machine and Solidity back in the day. And he learned some lessons from Ethereum, one being what happened with ICOs, where it was so easy to just launch any token, raise money, and run away with the funds without delivering on your promise. And part of the strategy with this concept of Parachain slot auctions with both Kusama and Polkadot is that it creates this. It's definitely significantly more work to launch in a Parachain slot, and it also creates some skin in the game through this process called Parachain slot auctions. So as a team, there's I think around 100 or more Parachain teams, or at least they're claiming to be Parachain teams. And in order to launch on Kusama, you have to win an auction against other Parachain teams who want to win any given slot at that time. And this auction is what's called an unpermissioned candle auction. And it's actually modeled after an auction that used to happen, I think, in the 1600s or so with boats. And they would light a candle, and then as soon as the candle went out, the auction would end. So you would never know exactly when the final bid would be. So the team at the Web3 Foundation modeled the auction in the same way, so that you wouldn't have what some people may have seen on eBay, where people come in and snipe at the last second and try to win at the very last second with a high bid. With this candle auction, what happens is on Kusama, this will be a 7-day period. The first 2 days will be kind of an opening period, and then the 5 final days will be what's called an ending period, where the winner could actually be randomly chosen at any moment, but you won't know that winner until the end of day 7. So what that does is, for teams like us, we want to be winning at all times during the 5-day ending period, because we never know when that winner is going to be chosen. So you're going to be making bids as the auction goes along. But as a team, you have 2 ways of actually bidding. The first way of bidding is to bid with just a single account that you as the team own. Maybe there's a team that has a lot of KSM and they just decide to bid on their own. The other option is to use what is actually the module within the substrate framework is actually called the crowd loan module. And this is what I think most teams will do, where you can actually crowdsource KSM for your team to use as your bid in the auction. So instead of bidding your own KSM, you're bidding from the whole community that's kind of behind you and supporting you. So that process of this crowd loan is open probably slightly before the auction starts, and then of course through the auction, so that people can continue contributing to that bid and raising your bid as the auction goes. So that's our strategy. We're going with the crowd loan option. We will be opening the crowd loan as soon as we can, and then when the auction's running, we hope to be winning at all times during that last 5 days, so that we know we're going to be selected as the winner. But I can't wait for this to happen. A lot of people in crypto, I think, aren't aware and aren't ready for what's to come, with Kusama auctions happening every week for at least 5 weeks until they probably take a pause. And then with Polkadot, this will probably happen around every couple of weeks. But I'd like to, one person on our team has kind of equated it to a horse race. It's kind of like crypto sports to me. Like on day 7, that's going to be super exciting, because everyone's going to be watching to see who gets, what time gets selected during the auction, and then of course who wins, and then that team going on to launch. So a lot is coming up with these auctions.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that you have to answer that question and describe it, because it may sound simple at first, but it gets very complex. And if there's something that blockchain engineers like more than 1880s economic schemes like candle auctions, I don't know what it is, but no, that's great. Okay, so earlier in our talk, you spoke a lot about Karura and some of the really cool features that are going to be coming to that. Maybe you could just describe a little bit more about some of the things that people have to look forward to when Karura goes live, provided you win a slot
Yeah.
auction, which you know we'll see, right?
Yeah, I hope so. But yeah, there's a lot of the three kind of core products that I mentioned earlier: the stablecoin, the DEX, and liquid KSM staking. Another one that I'll mention, which has to do with these auctions, is what we're calling our decentralized sovereign wealth fund. This is definitely something that's a differentiation between us and other Parachain teams, and it's actually partially related to auctions because over time, these DeFi protocols that we have will have bits of excess that go in and fund this on-chain treasury that we have. And that parachain auction process that I walked you through is not easy at all. Like we've been killing ourselves trying to get ready for this, and there's a lot of effort that goes into it. And our dream scenario is to get to the point where our on-chain treasury, this decentralized sovereign wealth fund, gets to the point where it can actually be the one bidding in auction number two. So when I gave you those two options of number one, bidding on your own with your own account, or number two, using a crowd loan, that option number one is what we actually hope to use, and the bid would come from our own treasury, which I think is a really fascinating and cool concept. But this is a kind of a pot of funds that will be owned and governed by the network and token holders themselves, and over time can be used, of course, for that use case, like I mentioned, bidding on a slot auction. But we'll also be doing several other things like holding and growing a kind of a fund of foreign assets. So the Karura treasury will likely own assets like KSM, can stake that, and so on. So that's the decentralized sovereign wealth fund. And then a couple more details around our other products. So with liquid KSM staking, this is personally the one I'm most excited about because at this point, when you're staking KSM, I stake through Polkadot.js. Some people stake through Kraken. There's different ways of doing it. One benefit that Kraken has is that you can basically unstake immediately. There's very little wait time. People who are staking on another website called Polkadot.js, we have to wait 7 days for Kusama and then 28 days to unstake on Polkadot. And that is definitely not ideal. So with liquid KSM staking, one of the things that it will bring is the ability to unstake or unbond almost immediately for a small fee. There will also be no staking minimums. And then third, which is kind of one of the biggest parts of this feature, is that when you're staking KSM normally, you're basically locking it away and there's no utility for it. With liquid KSM, you'll be able to stake and then get almost like a receipt that is one-to-one matching the KSM that you own that's staked. And the balance of that will actually continue to go up because it's reflecting the staking returns that are being added to your balance of KSM. So not to get into too much DeFi kind of detail, but a somewhat simple example of that is you could stake your KSM and get LKSM. And then we've got this Karura dollar, a stable coin. And if anyone listening has ever used Maker, you can basically provide collateral and take out a loan with that collateral put down. So with this LKSM, you could do the same thing. You could stake your KSM, get LKSM, and then use your LKSM as collateral to take a loan of KUSD if you wanted. And then you could do whatever you want with that. You could make a payment, you could do a swap in the DEX, what have you. So it just unlocks some utility of your KSM. So yeah, a couple
Yeah, I
examples
think
there for
that's
you.
yeah, that's great. Like I think it's like super powerful. You described a little bit about like the importance of composability and being able to do whatever you want. You know, uh, recently a lot of projects are asking people to lock up funds. With ETH2, it's almost indefinitely. And I think providing ways for people to be liquid and to use it in other DeFi protocols, that makes a huge difference for people. So now that we've kind of talked about like how the technology helps people, let's let's take a moment to just talk a little bit about what I think a lot of people who will be participating in the slot auctions on Kraken will be concerned about, which is what's the token distribution plan? What are the tokenomics around all this? Like what can people expect if Karura wins this slot auction?
Yeah. So I mentioned a couple times the stablecoin, which is KUSD. That's a stablecoin for the network, and then our governance and kind of network utility token is KAR, the Karura token. So specifically for the crowd loan and parachain auction process, it's a little difficult because what we can give is a minimum. So 12 KAR for every 1 KSM contributed is the absolute minimum. That's because we have to actually wait and see the participation levels. The minimum, of course, is if we basically max out the parachain auction process, but it's kind of like a pool. So if there's less people who participate, there's more to go around. So we'll just have to wait and see. But yeah, 12 plus is kind of what we're saying for token distribution for parachain auction supporters. And then you mentioned just the overall distribution. So I can walk through that just in terms of like the whole supply and how that's broken down. So we have some early backers and backers that have around 28% total of the supply. For Karura, the founding team's tokens were actually reduced down to 10%. And then we've got around 60.87 or 61% of the token distribution set aside for the community. So that includes things like this first parachain auction process, the kind of rewards that get distributed to supporters, ecosystem development, our treasury that I mentioned, there's 11.6% that's held for the treasury, and then another reward reserve. So one thing people have been asking is what happens if Karura has this just fantastic level of support, and we actually do max out. We're actually willing to give out. I don't want to be quoted exactly on this, but it's I think around 5 or 6% additional from that reward reserve that we've committed to bringing in if we actually need to, because this is the first parachain auction ever. So we actually we don't know what to expect. We're just going to kind of wait and see what happens in the Kusama fashion, expecting chaos. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it's definitely been an interesting journey just since we've been involved with it. So I guess we probably should have asked you this up front, but I mean, I'd love to hear a little bit about the team's story and like where people have come from. Like, how did this team form, and how did you guys come to decide to work on this?
Yeah, so the 4 founders are Rui Tao, he's our CEO. Betty is our COO. Brian is our CTO, and then Fu Yao is one of our co-founders and also CEO of PokeWallet. So the 4 of them, kind of like I mentioned earlier, the 3, Rui Tao, Betty, and Brian, they worked together at another blockchain project. Got along very well. I think had similar ideas for what they wanted to work on in the future. So they started building a synthetic asset trading platform, and then they met Fu Yao at a hackathon in Shanghai, I believe. And he was super passionate about DeFi, and the 4 of them got along great, so decided to start Acala. So Acala is based in New Zealand, so Rui Tao, Brian, and Betty are there, and then Fu Yao is based in Shanghai and has a team there as well, which is a huge advantage for us, honestly, because we've got a team who knows and understands the Chinese market, and then we've got the New Zealand team, and then people like me, and we've got 3 or 4 people in the US, and then we've got a couple in Europe. So we can kind of do both. It's hard to do both, but we've got people who speak many different languages, so it helps a lot with covering different markets.
Where in the world would you say you find the most interest right now? Like where do you think the highest level of excitement for Parachains is?
It's pretty distributed. There's a ton of interest in Asia and China specifically. It's similar to Polkadot, and to be honest. There's a lot of interest in Europe. Maybe that stems from Parity and Web3 Foundation being in Germany and Switzerland. And then there's been a lot of work done in the Asian region. So lots of interest there as well. And then, of course, for us in the United States, it's still a growing, I think, educational task for getting people to know and understand around Polkadot. One thing that happened a couple weeks ago was the Osprey Fund. They just started a Polkadot Trust based in the U.S. So things like that are great progress for growing the community for Polkadot and Kusama in the U.S.
So I think a big piece of the draw to Polkadot is this idea that there's interoperability, right? Like Gavin has like always kind of espoused this kind of concept around, it's not replacing Ethereum, right? It's creating, a platform that can interoperate with all these different blockchains. So in terms of Acala and Karura, like what other teams and projects have you guys been collaborating with, and why did you decide to do that if you have any of those?
Yeah. So there's examples now in the Polkadot and Kusama ecosystem of other Parachain teams that we're working with, as well as examples outside of this kind of Polkadot and Kusama ecosystem. So I think first maybe I'll mention outside of this. So one that I'm really excited about is working with Compound. So
I thought you were going to say Kraken.
Kraken, of course. On like the more technical DeFi type integrations, Compound Chain, this is a very, I guess, little known fact is that Compound, of course, is one of the DeFi kind of pioneers from the Ethereum ecosystem. But recently did this, I'm sure they did an evaluation of what framework to use or what tools to use to build their own independent blockchain. So of course you've got several options out there, but the Compound team chose to build with Substrate. So they made the same decision as the original Acala team as far as, okay, let's build with this framework that we can use to customize the blockchain. In their case, they're not, I don't think they're still planning on connecting in as an actual parachain on Polkadot. With Substrate, you don't have to. That plug and play security is a benefit that's optional. You can actually go through the trouble of recruiting your own set of validators. So that's what they're doing. So with Compound, they're going to have this Compound chain. And we recently got one of the first Compound grants to build what's called a starport. It's basically a fancy name for a bridge between Acala and Compound. And those products that I mentioned to you earlier, Liquid KSM for Karura, but on Polkadot, it'll be Liquid Dot. And Dot, we actually will be bringing Dot and LDOT over to Compound to use in their kind of multi-chain money market, which is just going to be so cool to see come to fruition. And then on Compound side, they're going to have this cash token that we'll bring over to Acala, and people can use that within Acala's DeFi ecosystem, maybe as collaterals, maybe in the DEX, what have you. So that's one example from the Ethereum world, and now not traditional, but an independent Substrate chain. And then within the Polkadot ecosystem, there's, almost unlimited opportunities for working with other teams. One reason why I'm excited about Karura and hoping that we get the first Parachain slot is because we've got these kind of utilities or products that can be leveraged by other subsequent Parachain teams, like the stablecoin and the DEX. So all these things can be leveraged by other teams. So, for example, Fala is a kind of like a privacy-focused parachain where we can actually integrate with Fala on the back end for private transactions for DeFi, where the user may not even need to know. The transaction can run out of Acala into Fala's privacy-focused parachain, and then that transaction will be obfuscated in somehow and then sent back to Acala, and the transaction will be kind of privacy enabled. So there will be a lot of this working together with teams like Fala. Moonbeam is another example. So there's teams. Moonbeam is going for this kind of Ethereum on Polkadot type of environment, making it easy for teams to come over and build using the Ethereum tools that they know. And Sushi is one team that's building on Moonbeam. So what you'll see is when Sushi launches, there will be the ability to integrate the Acala dollar within Sushi's DEX on top of Moonbeam, but leveraging AUSD from Acala, another layer one blockchain. So there will be a lot of interaction between Polkadot, and it's one of the main reasons why teams are choosing to build in this ecosystem.
Yeah, it's super fascinating, and there's a lot more to actually building the parachains than I think people probably understand at the surface. You mentioned earlier in our talk, like about how there was back in 2017 and stuff, there was the ICO stuff that kind of hit, and a lot of people invested in those projects, like not really understanding what was going on because they were basically templated tokens that were just built from the spec. But I think when you dig into some of the projects like what you guys are working on, there's just so much more to it. There's just so many more engineering challenges and depth of engineering that I think people will be really, really surprised to see when these things go live, how like powerful they can be. So I have one more final question for you. I mean, let's take a look into the future now that we've kind of thought about how this all is going to go down. What exactly do you see happening, 12 months out, like where is this all going? Like, where would you like to see this be in a year?
Yeah, I think one thing that is almost for sure, it won't be every blockchain network connected together, but this idea of a multi-chain future is almost surely going to happen. I like to compare it to the traditional world where you've got like MongoDB, Oracle, all these different database platforms that are all competing with each other, but they're all tied together in this huge internet that we use. So, but when I go to the grocery store and use the credit card machine, I'm not going to that grocery because they use a MongoDB database. I'm going there because it works and that
You don't. You don't. I
yeah.
thought everybody did that.
And same with like applications on our phone. Like people don't use Instagram because of the database behind it. They use it because it works. So I think the same thing goes for this is probably not a year out. This is more like 10 or 20, but I think the future is where these low level networks, these infrastructures like Kusama and Polkadot, Ethereum, Solana, whatever comes up in the future, this will not be successful until we don't know that those networks are even there. Because like my parents, my family who aren't in crypto, this stuff is way too difficult to use right now. It needs to get to the point where it can actually compete with Web 2 applications in terms of ease of use. But in the more near term, where I see Polkadot and Kusama going is there will be bridges implemented. So there's already teams building Bitcoin bridges, Ethereum bridges, and then hopefully there will be bridges to all these kind of major layer one networks. And this will create this huge multi-chain network where users and liquidity will be flowing between these blockchain networks freely without this kind of isolated mentality that we've had with Bitcoin and Ethereum for the past 8-10 years.
That sounds like an amazing vision. And I guess I just because we are living in a meme culture, I have to ask you this. So the slogan for Kusama is "Expect Chaos," right? Or I don't know if it's official or unofficial, but on a scale of 1 to 10, how much chaos can we expect, in your opinion?
A decent amount, but not too much. I do know that, like with Kusama, the Parachain auction process, they're definitely moving really fast and kind of holding true to the expect chaos mantra. So it will be probably chaotic, especially because especially in this early phase of like the first 5 parachains launching, it's the first time ever that this has really happened. So we can only hope that all the testing on testnet was indicative of what was going to happen on the live Kusama network. But of course, things will happen that we didn't expect. So maybe 7 out of 10. It'll be pretty chaotic, and then Polkadot hopefully is more like a 1, and that's kind of the whole point.
Yeah, exactly. Well, great. All right, Dan. Well, that was a great conversation we just had. Really, really great stuff. Where can we find out more about Acala, Karura, and everything going on? Where can we read this very simple, clear documentation around all of the cool things you guys are doing? Where can we go to find out more?
Yeah, I think probably one of the easiest places to go would be Twitter. So if you look up Acala, it's at Acala Network and at Karura Network. Karura is a little hard to say, so it's Karura. And then there's a Linktree link on both of those Twitter pages. So that has basically all of our links for those two networks. Acala.network is the website where you can read everything about Acala and Karura. And then my Twitter, I cover Acala Karura stuff as well as Polkadot and Kusama and try to make things easy to understand. So my Twitter is at Dan Reecer, REECER_. Yeah.
Well, thanks again to Dan Reecer for joining us today. It was really fun chatting with you. And if you like to follow every twist and turn in this industry, be sure to like and subscribe to never miss an episode. This content is not financial or investment advice. All interviews and discussions are opinions only. Kraken does not endorse the accuracy of this content. None of the following information should be construed as a recommendation to support any specific Parachain project or to participate in Parachain auctions in general. See our terms of service for more information.